How will life change for the soon-to-be American white minority? That's always something that I'm curious about because I really don't see it changing all that much. But here is some information that I think that would give us all some peace of mind. Whether you are white or whether you're non-white, I think that this show and the information that I'm sharing with you will give you some peace of mind. In the 2015 census, published a report projecting that by 2044 the United States would have a white majority and that it would become by then merely a white plurality. That immigration and fertility trends would lead to America's ethnic and racial minorities outnumbering its white population. Since then, it's become a sort of countdown to the white apocalypse that I don't see. But I guess some do, but I don't see. There's certainly the white nationalists see it as an apocalypse. I don't. I think whites are going to be in charge for a long, long time, but that's my personal opinion. But worse, we can now talk about cross-racial fertility rates. That's the new terminology. If you haven't heard of it, look it up on Google. Cross-racial fertility rates. What does that mean? That means that couples who marry with another race, according to some studies, have less children than those who marry the same race. And that could be the reason why whites are not having as many babies. Because white men are preferring non-white women, and white women may be preferring non-white men. And because of that, they're not having as many babies. That's not my opinion, okay? I'm just letting you know what's out there and what some of these white nationalists believe in. This is not my terminology. I was just as surprised about this as you probably are when you hear it. My mouth dropped, but I included it in the program because it's out there, it's news, and it's real. Now, given the racialized nature of our political parties, these demographic changes also have electoral consequences, and that's where whites are very worried. However, if we're to overcome the division that defined our past, we must start talking about this now. If not, we're going to continue divided, and that doesn't make any sense. Welcome to The Naked Truth on the USA Podcast channel, on YouTube, and USA One Podcast on 16 additional podcast sites. The program where I share the important notes of the day from newspapers, magazines, social networks, radio, television in the United States from my Hispanic point of view that impact all Americans, not just some. I'm Juan Andres, also known as Senor USA. So here we go. There is no future in which white people disappear from America, folks. That's not going to happen. But there is also no future in which the meaning of white stays the same. What are you saying? This is sacrilege. White meant many different things throughout the history of the United States. And I'm going to give you some examples. It adjusts. 250 years ago, being white meant one thing. 100 years ago, it meant another thing. 50 years ago, it meant another thing. It's like language. It's an ever-evolving description. Okay? It doesn't mean what it meant when this country was founded. From 1845 to 1854, an influx of Irish people arrived on the East Coast that outnumbered immigrants from all other countries put together. Our history shows that was a problem. They were concerned at that time. America's demographic boundaries evolve with a country's composition. No group goes extinct or disappears. It just gets absorbed into the new reality. And that's what's going to happen this time, just like it happened before. After the arrival of millions of Irish, the 15th Amendment enfranchised millions of African American men. And in subsequent decades, the United States admitted millions of Italians, Jews, and other ethnicities. There was a gradual realization that the Anglo-Protestant orientation of whiteness was unlikely to sustain as a dominant majority indefinitely. So they knew then that they had to change it. They had to adjust it to the reality of the time. But by the time Americans' initial majority-minority reality was reached, whiteness had been reinterpreted to incorporate the Irish, to incorporate the Italians, to incorporate the Jews. I remember, and the Slavs, such that the reality was postponed. Effectively, that new reality made the white community larger because it included more people. The country broadened the definition of white people enough to maintain power over African Americans, Asians, and Hispanics. That was it from the very beginning. When they realized that they had to include the Jews, the Slavs, the Irish, the Italians, because they wanted to maintain the power over the blacks, the yellows, and the browns. And that's when it got nasty. That's when it got nasty. It was a very specific definition that we're still living with today. We might again be in the process of altering our reality of whiteness, and I'll give you an example. Many Hispanics identify as white, and marriages between Hispanics and non-Hispanic whites make up more than 40% of recent interracial marriages. 40%. That may be enough to artificially postpone America's racial reality again and reassure the millions of white Americans who feel threatened by the increasing status and power of today's ethnic minorities. But understand one thing. That's done by changing the census, which Donald Trump tried to do in the last census. And even though he couldn't get in the citizenship question, he altered it enough, okay, where I saw some categories of race that weren't there in the previous one. When I tried to answer it as a minority, it confined me to go in a certain direction that I didn't have to go in before. It was caging me into a direction that was uncomfortable for me. And for many mixed race people that I consider myself. So that's why you saw that mixed race category jump to high heaven, because it was manipulated by the Trump government. And you got the results. It didn't change, it didn't increase the whites. It just created a bigger monster because no one sat down to think of the consequences. Well, here they are facing you now. And that was done without forethought, as was typical during the 4 years of the Trump administration. He did things that he thought was very good without thinking of the consequences, and you saw what happened. Through a historical lens, being white in America today is like belonging to an exclusive social club that had to loosen its membership criteria to get more members or it was going to go bankrupt. Now, because of the status white people retain in American society, a degree of privilege and belonging still awaits those who can claim it. People who identify as white hold disproportionate power and resources today. And this is unlikely to change even if whites become 49%. Okay, so if you're 51% now and you go down to 49, 2 points isn't going to change a darn thing as far as your style of living. That white privilege that you now enjoy that we don't have, you're going to keep that. And you'll keep it for about 20 more years, I think. That's my personal opinion. And there is very little evidence of America's diverse minority ethnic groups uniting, so a 51% minority mix is unlikely to yield any new majority status without a new united sense of community. In other words, if the yellow, the brown, and the black don't sit down at the table and start working together, creating what they tried to do many years ago, the Rainbow Coalition, which had nothing to do with the gay community. Their rainbow wasn't the Rainbow Coalition that was started initially. The Rainbow Coalition was the yellow, the black, and the whites that wanted to be part of it. And there were many. The blacks, the browns, the yellows, and what we in the minority community call the sensible white people that understand that we need to change accordingly. We're going to have to be facing that again. We're going to have to sit down and address that if we're ever going to address the problem of inequality in this country. Because as long as we're divided, we're fighting different battles, and we're never going to win the war. We're going to win a battle here and there. We're not going to win the war. We have to unite. You call it whatever you want. You don't like the word rainbow because it now is identified with another movement? Change the name. Call it whatever you want to. But the fact that the leaders in our communities have to sit down and get together and start working together in unison, it better happen. And it better happen pretty darn fast, or it's going to cost us a lot. Now, let's get back to the history. Because this goes back a long, long time. Where did this white nationalism come from? And why is it the way that it is? Well, vestiges of it happened all the way back to President Theodore Roosevelt. Not the Roosevelt that gave minorities all the benefits after the Second World War. This is a guy before, his cousin, Theodore. The horse-riding military guy that liked attacking Puerto Rico on his horse and going up the hill and claiming Puerto Rico for himself. And the United States. Anyway, President Theodore Roosevelt offered us a way forward back then. His then American nationalism, not white nationalism, but American nationalism, was defiantly civic, rather than only ethnic or racially intentioned in nature. Can the white nationalists learn from Theodore? Who knows? Who knows? That's unlikely because it's present leader Donald Trump. I wish he would learn from history. It would sure be a lot easier in this poor country that gave him the ability to achieve all his wealth. You'd think he'd be kind and loving to his nation instead of dividing it. It's been generous to him. It's loved him back. And guess what? The nation is everybody, not just a few. He's an ingrate. He doesn't love this country, or he would love everything about it. Anyway, in his narrative histories published from 1885 to 1894, Theodore Roosevelt argued that as European immigrants were assimilated, their heritages were being absorbed into the American body, fusing Americans into a single people forged in the crucible of the frontier. The acts of claiming and developing land and defending it against the forces of nature all constituted rites of passage that transformed foreigners into Americans. In Theodore Roosevelt's understanding, Americans became Americans not through a document. They were made by their encounters with life and their cultivation of strength, individualism, and democratic community, their commitment to a set of principles. For him, the new ethnicities admitted into the United States were not entitled to their American identity. It was to be earned. There's no frontier anymore, But the grind of modern capitalism is just as difficult, if not more, to create an American identity. And even if the Census Bureau's categories reinforce the racial boundaries that too often divide American society, these categories are also starting to show signs of their mutability, their changes. The number of mixed-race Americans increased by 300% in the past decade, ladies and gentlemen. 80% of intermarriages in the United States today unite non-Hispanic white partners with members of an ethnic or racial minority. 80%. So that 300% is going to grow. Older generations like the seniors running the Republican Party may still be stuck on century-old divisions. And Trump is definitely there, and probably the worst of the worst as far as not wanting to change, not wanting to accept the reality that this country is. His version of making America great is going back to the past. And America's not going in that direction. Maybe a third of its citizens are that believe they need to go back to become great again. I don't know where they got that idea from, because they're totally wrong. America's greater than it's ever been. It's bigger than it's ever been. It's stronger than it's ever been. It's more powerful than it's ever been. And it's because of its diversity, its melting pot. So it's going in the opposite direction, but this guy is stuck somewhere in the Middle Ages. I don't know. But folks, all you seniors who want to see and live like it used to be, understand that younger Americans are starting to make your goals disappear. Not the minorities. We're talking about younger Americans in general, white included. And there's a big division there. Huge division between whites, seniors, and the younger white generation. Americans are starting to make them disappear, or the 300% in interracial marriages would not have happened. Get the message. The country's talking to you. It's letting you know where it's going to go. I don't care whether you like it or not. You can make this ride bumpy and make yourself miserable and hurt the country along the way, but it's still going to get there. It's going to get there because this is bigger than you. It's bigger than 100 million of you. This is the greatest country in the world, and it's there because of its diversity. So even if Donald Trump's white nationalists get their way temporarily, which I sincerely doubt, or at least not in the way they would like to get it by returning to the M.A.G.A. nostalgic past of making America great again. Why? Because we are great, and the melting pot has made us great. Some of the greatest American corporations like Microsoft, McDonald's, PepsiCo, Google, U.S. Steel, just to name a few, just to name drop a few, are led by foreign-born executives, not M.A.G.A. followers. And almost half of all Fortune 500 companies were founded by immigrants or their children, not M.A.G.A. followers. Companies like Amazon, Apple, Tesla, and Google, just to name a few. And the United States has the largest population of migrants in all the world. You have more migrants here than any other country on the planet. Where do you think they're going to go? You're going to dig a hole? Well, if you dig a hole, it must be for you, because there's so many of us that we're almost half the country. Migrants that fill the workforce, pay taxes, and buy goods. Without these foreign-born migrant contributors to the U.S. economy, we would not be the world's #1 economy anymore. Our quality of life would decline immediately and substantially. Do the math. And even more important, without the contribution of minorities who are approaching 50% and will exceed it very shortly, and we're not talking taking over the power of the country, we're just paying taxes and being inclusive and buying stuff. We gotta buy. If we don't buy our products, we're not gonna get anywhere. We're gonna drop like a lead balloon, pop to the floor. We gotta buy. Buy to keep us strong. And you can't have half the country rebel against the whites and say, we're not gonna buy. We're gonna suffer for a little bit just to drag you down. Imagine if we were to do that. We don't think that way. We don't threaten you that way like you threaten us. But if we were to do that, and we do have the power, don't you think for 1 minute we don't. We just love America. And I know you love America as well, but you want to show it in a different way that marginalizes part of the country. We don't want to marginalize you. We want you to have what you deserve. We want you to keep what you have. But don't get in our way. Get out of the way. Because we're coming straight at you whether you like it or not. 50%, folks. If we don't buy, and we don't pay taxes, and we don't cooperate to the full extent that we do, you would disappear as the number one economy overnight. Bam! That fast. So, before MAGA followers and QAnon members go off and do something ridiculously stupid, think of the economic consequences and how you would be hurting the most powerful, the most beautiful country in the world. I love it. And whether you like it or not, I love you because you're part of it. I may not like you. I don't have to like you, but I love you because I love this country. And you don't have to like me. And frankly, I could care less if you like me, and I guarantee you that the majority of the minorities don't give a royal hoot whether you like us or not. But love the country. And if you love the country, you won't do things that will bring it down, that will tear it down, that will hurt it. Don't tell me that attacking the Capitol was in the best interest of the most powerful nation on earth. That was ridiculous. And that wasn't loving the country. I'm Juan Andres, also known as Senor USA on The Naked Truth. You can listen to all our programs by visiting the USA Podcast channel on YouTube or the USA One podcast on 16 additional podcast sites. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time.